You are listening to the Business Talk podcast. I'm your host Deepak. We are delighted to welcome Dr. Abhijit Sengupta, Associate Professor of Business Analytics at Surrey Business School, University of Surrey, as our esteemed guest on today's podcast. He previously served as the head of the Department of Business Analytics and Operations at Surrey Business School. Dr. Sengupta earned his PhD in Economics from Stony Brook University, New York, and MA in Economics from Jawaharlal Nehru University, and BSc in Economics from the University of Calcutta, India. His research focuses on innovation and technology management, the science of science, and complex systems and networks, with a particular interest in the dynamics of collaborative research and its impact on science and society. Much of his work examines how research translates into measurable impact, especially in the higher education sector. He employs advanced quantitative techniques, including econometrics, machine learning, and agent-based simulations, and brings experience from both academic and industrial research settings. Dr. Sengupta's work has appeared in leading journals such as Research Policy, British Journal of Management, Journal of World Business, Journal of Business Research, Tech Innovation, and Journal of Economic Dynamics and Control. His research has been supported by the Economic and Social Research Council, British Academy, and the Society for Research in Higher Education. He also holds visiting positions at the InnoLab, University of Vasa in Finland, and the Centre for Innovation Management Research, Birkbeck, University of London. Dr. Sengupta sits on the editorial board of the British Journal of Management, has served as a special issue associate editor, and is a member of the Peer Review College at the British Academy of Management, as well as Fellow of the Royal Society of Arts. His earlier academic appointments include the University of Kent and the University of Essex. Before entering academia, Dr. Sengupta worked at Unilever R&D as a research scientist and later senior scientist, leading projects on price optimization, consumer behavior analytics, and brand competition strategy. In this episode, Dr. Abhijit Sengupta explores his research, bridging worlds, university-industry collaboration, and inclusive innovation for public good, shedding lights on how partnerships between academia and industry can drive innovation that benefits society at large. And now it's an honor to welcome Dr. Abhijit Sengupta to the podcast. We are grateful to you, Professor Sengupta, for joining us. It's both a privilege and pleasure to host you on the episode.
Thank you, Deepak. It is indeed a pleasure for me to join your podcast, and thank you once again for inviting me. It's a genuine pleasure to speak to you.
Thank you. Professor, what inspired your research on bridging worlds in the context of university-industry collaboration, and how do you define inclusive innovation?
Right. So, well, these are two different areas. So let me start off with how I started with what you call bridging worlds, bringing university and industry together. So for that, I have to go back quite a while back because as you mentioned, I've worked in industry for quite a bit after my PhD in economics. And once I made a transition back into academia, I was basically fishing around for topics to work on. And given my previous work in industry, where I had seen industry collaborate with academia, it was a phenomenon of interest to me. But like all things, there was a bit of serendipity as well. And you might have seen my publications previously with Professor Amit Ray from JNU. It was a very serendipitous meeting with him around 14 years ago. All of a sudden, in London at a mutual friend's house, he was my professor back in JNU when I was doing my master's, and it was after a long time that I had met him. And we started talking, and this was an area of research he was working on. And he asked me if I would like to collaborate with him. And that's how it all started. So because of a bit of my background and because of a very lucky meeting that I had with him. So that's how I sort of entered this area and also went into other areas of innovation, including, as you call, um, um, uh, this innovation for what I would like to say is inclusivity, for inclusive innovation, which is basically looking at how innovation can benefit the poor, bottom of pyramid, or people who are generally don't come into the limelight in terms of innovation when we think of innovation. But that is also something a bit serendipitous because it was a colleague of mine, Professor Soma Athray in University of Essex, who is now actually in IIT Delhi, who invited me to join this work because she was working on this topic with another student of hers, and I just came into it, and it's a bit of a side project for me, but it was eye-opening in a way, and yeah, like all things in research, often a bit of luck, a bit of opportunity, and a bit of serendipity works and goes a long way.
Professor, universities often excel at generating new knowledge, but transferring it to industry can be challenging. What models or mechanisms have you found most effective for successful knowledge transfer?
That's a good question. So a lot of my research, as you have mentioned, it has to do with university industry collaborations and university industry knowledge transfer, knowledge exchange. And while researching this topic, as I said with Professor Ray a long time ago, where when I started, we found that there's no one solution to this. There is a wide pathway of frameworks and a wide variety of pathways rather which work, which universities and industry uses in this. And these pathways are often formal, which are contractual, and often informal, which we can observe, but where records may not exist. So in examples of formal pathways of university industry collaborations could be, for example, the typical commercialization exercises where the US, for example, leads the pack. You have university level spin-outs, you have patents which universities produce, which then get licensed into industry directly by someone who wants to license that, or through a spin-out company which is focused on a certain output. So commercialization is one of them. Then there are other pathways like sponsored research. So a company might come to a university and say that here is a problem in this area. We want this problem to be solved, and the university puts together a team to try and solve this problem. This could not just be a business; it could be the government, it could be the policymaker as well who comes to the university. Then, of course, there is a lot of consulting projects which happen. Academics consult a lot with partners, external stakeholders, and this might happen through the university or might happen privately. But consulting is a big pathway through how this happens. And finally, and last but not the least, there are informal channels, as I mentioned. And informal channels take a lot of bandwidth, but they're often not recorded. So, for example, you have experts who are called on media. You have experts who visit and give lectures, public lectures. There are museums who hold, events where they invite academics or they work with academics on research. You have academics who sit on company boards as special advisors. They might even come to be a witness in a court of law on a certain topic. So, there are these much more informal channels which lead to interaction between the two sides, bridging worlds, and formal channels, as I mentioned. So there is a whole plethora of various different channels which are available for this to happen.
Dr. Abhijit, how can universities ensure that innovation partnerships are not just commercially driven, but also address broader social and public good objectives?
Yes, this is a very difficult question, but it also has an easy answer. The easy answer is that they cannot. Honestly speaking, universities are repositories and producers of knowledge, a public good. Once that knowledge is created and presented to the world, you cannot exclude anyone from using it, right? Except through patents which give temporary license, but the knowledge itself is available even through a patent. So they cannot really ensure that a certain amount of knowledge that they have created is not used to address broader social or public good objective. However, what they can do, and like every partner in any relationship can do, is to ensure that they do not that a formal partnership doesn't generate a public bad, let's say, which means that their knowledge, that the collaboration itself is not being used to do anything which harms society or harm individuals or uh, uh, discriminate against individuals, for example, or organizations. So it is our duty as scientists and researchers and universities to carry out that due diligence, to ensure that the intentions of whoever we are collaborating are honest, and they need to play an active role in this. So But at the same time, the society also has a role because the institutional context plays a huge role in making sure that there are checks and balances, there are legal frameworks available which protect and, if necessary, punish individuals who are actually using these kind of collaborations on new knowledge to create to do something which is against the public good. So both as researchers, as universities, as the legal framework, as the institution itself, we need to be much more aware, and we need to be completely um, open about how our knowledge is being used and how what the collaboration is for. So, easy answer, universities cannot do anything, but at the same time, they can do a lot around the collaboration in order to ensure that it's done for a public good objective.
Professor, many SMEs lack the R&D capacity of large corporations. How can university collaborations level the playing field and help some smaller firms innovate inclusivity?
Again, a very good question. Now, SMEs are important for the economy, right? For any economy, SMEs are extremely important because they are the ones who provide the bulk of employment in the economy, and they play a very key role. It's not just big corporations. So, however, the asymmetry lies in the fact that, as you mentioned, that big corporations have a lot of resources. They can avail knowledge resources or the kind of technology or etc. which they need from elsewhere, but the SMEs often cannot. So what can universities do? There are lots of things that the universities can do, and they actually do. They play a big role. The higher education sector plays a big role in ensuring that SMEs actually can benefit from them. So, first of all, when it comes to university industry collaboration or knowledge transfer, they can have universities can provide startup and incubator services, for example, which a lot of big universities, a lot of research active universities do. They can even lease out facilities and advanced equipment for experimentation, testing, prototyping, which happens a lot because SMEs may not have those facilities themselves, but they can actually avail of the universities when they can use those facilities at a relatively cheaper cost. As I mentioned before, academics can be consultants. They can actually help the SME to build up, to scale up, or to solve a particular problem that they have. Now, there are programs in the UK, for example, or even in other parts of the world, where there are incentives from the policymakers to bring SMEs and universities together to try and help ensure that, on one hand, university finds a home for the research in terms of real impact, and also SMEs find the resources necessary with minimum cost to them, which will help them in a way. And of course, finally, SMEs can avail of the human capital, that is the students who are being trained, who are graduating from universities to find employment. So that is obviously the big job of universities, which they have all traditionally done. And finally, universities are ecosystems. They create ecosystems not within themselves, but also around in the local region, in the broader national region, bringing together various different partners, not just connecting with them, but also enabling connecting with each other. So that network infrastructure, that ecosystem that a university provides, if if SMEs are fortunate to be within that ecosystem, they can actually benefit quite a lot. So even without actively participating within a university, the university's ecosystem, the research ecosystem, the innovation ecosystem can help SMEs tremendously. And that is an active area of research which many of us are actually working on.
Professor, are there examples where a university industry partnership directly improved access to technology or services for underserved communities?
Um, Underserved communities. So again, this goes back to the inclusive innovation topic that you mentioned. Yes, there are tons and tons of examples actually, and I don't think I'll have the time to go through a lot of them. But there are loads of new examples where universities have played a key role in providing access to technology or services to traditionally underserved communities, as you mentioned. So examples in I'll give an example from India itself. For example, there is this network called the Honeybee Network, which started in 1988. A similar one started in Brazil called the Social Technology Network, and they're all about bringing together academics, policymakers, stakeholders, the civil society to create knowledge networks, okay, where the knowledge from one part of the network, like the university, can flow to the civil society, or the university can actually help in um, transferring that knowledge from one part of the civil society to another. So this is a typical example which started in India. Then more direct examples of universities playing a greater role for underserved communities. There are loads of examples in the health sector. In developed economies like in the US, University of Washington, for example, they have done work on turning smartphones into medical diagnostic tools. This is something which also has been done in India by IISc. Um, IITs have been extremely active in India, where actually connecting with local populations, local communities, and underserved communities, poorer communities, for example. So there are loads of these examples, and agriculture, sanitation, once again, are big examples as well. And I just have to also say that any kind of technology that you see coming from a university or being developed with the help of a university going to the broader society, like whether it's gene editing, the CRISPR, MRI, GPS, internet, these have all developed with the help of universities somewhere or the other in upstream. And all of them, they're helping every section of the society, including the bottom of the pyramid, let's say, or the poorer section. So every technology that you see is that developed with university involvement, I think serves these communities some way or the other. So it's much broader than we generally think.
Professor, what role do public sector agencies and policymakers play in shaping effective and equitable innovation ecosystems?
So public sector agencies and policymakers, as I had mentioned in one of your previous questions, they play a huge role. I mean, you cannot have innovation ecosystems which are progressive, which are efficient without the help of public sector agencies and policymakers. So first of all, it's up to the policymaker, to the national government, for example, at a very high levels to set the roadmap for innovation, right? India is saying this currently and have seen this for the 75 years of its independence. Priorities, missions, roadmaps. Um, in the US, you had the Apollo program. These wouldn't have been possible without a public sector coming in, the government coming in and saying, this is our priority, let's do this, and involving different participants. That's at a very high level. Now, we also have to see that the private sector, for example, they do a lot of research, they do a lot of innovation, obviously, but the focus of the private sector is very short term and profit driven. Naturally, there is no value judgment here. Um, but there is at the same time, in the economy, a need for a longer term vision, right? And this is where the public sector comes in. They can lay the foundations of the blue sky research, the fundamental research, which the private sector may not be going into immediately, because the pathway to impact, or the when that impact will take place, is too far away, beyond the horizons of the private sector, right? And this is exactly what agencies like the National Science Foundation in the US, the European Commission in Europe, UK Research and Innovation in the UK, they do. That is what they do. They manage public funds for research, but they also set the agenda. They set the agenda for long-term research with impact in mind, with the idea that there has to be a pathway to impact. But without these agencies, that blue sky research will stop, and any kind of innovation, downstream innovation, will stop as well. So that's the other purpose. And finally, I would say address large, complex, multi-stakeholder involved wicked problems. Wicked problems are problems which have many stakeholders, many opposing viewpoints, something like sustainability, climate change, role of AI, even COVID-19 for that matter. These were big problems, complex problems, and you need public sector agencies to coordinate the solution to these. You cannot have only private sector working on it, because they will only look at the problem from a narrow perspective with a short term. For that long term risky view, the idea of getting into this with a certain amount of risk involved, that's what the public sector does. and of course provide the legal and institutional frameworks, build foundations for the networks, which I just talked about. These are all basic building blocks of any national innovation system, and where public sector has a huge role to play. I hope that answers your question.
Yes. Dr. Sengupta, are there particular funding models or incentive structure that make collaborations more sustainable and impactful?
Are there any particular funding models or incentive structure? Yes, there are. I am more familiar with the UK model, right? Given where I work, and I've studied that closely, so I can talk. Let me talk about the UK model, and a lot of it can be generalized to many other parts of the world, and other parts have also these kind of models as well. So, for example, one extremely good example is that of what is called a knowledge transfer partnership, a KTP program in the UK. That is run by UKRI, that is UK Research and Innovation. What it does is that they provide funds to bring together an industrial partner and a university partner together to work on a very specific short-term to medium-term problem where the knowledge is missing in the business partner and they're looking to fulfill that knowledge gap from a university. But they may not actually either have the funds or the know-how of how to find that solution. So what the KTP program does is that they bring together by hiring an associate, providing the funds to hire an associate who can actually in a dedicated fashion work on that problem. But this works very well, and you have small firms, large firms, medium firms, all of them who have benefited from this kind of a targeted, dedicated program to bring um, universities and industry together. But there are also longer term programs which look at longer term impact. So funding schemes which sort of incentivize collaborative working, which say you need to have interdisciplinary research, you need to have stakeholders from elsewhere, from outside academia, to involved in longer term research problems, etc., where they will give you funds where to do this collaboratively, as long as you show that there is a long-term impact pathway there. That is, there is a clear vision of how your research can actually have societal impact. So these target very broad research questions, often risky research questions, and they're not driven by immediate knowledge gaps, which, for example, the KTP does. So there are alternative models, and depending on which part of the world you're in, what kind of context you're working on, these might have to be tweaked, but there already are many of them in other parts of the world, and I'm sure they can be sort of brought from one context and translated into another. So yeah, there are quite a few of them.
How can universities balance the sometimes conflicting priorities of academic freedom, commercial interest, and societal needs?
How can universities balance the conflicting priorities? This is the question that you ask. This is the research question which has driven not just me, loads and loads of researchers before me, and also at the same currently. And I think there have been tons of research done on this problem, and it's very difficult for me to actually give you a right answer here because there is no one answer which fits all. So I will probably point you towards a couple of papers of mine and some work of mine, which actually addresses this question. So, for example, there's a paper I published in the British Journal of Management on choice of business models for universities who are trying to enhance their knowledge exchange function. And that where we have seen that the local context, the local history of the university, its own research profile and research quality, etc., determines what kind of models they have adopted, right? There's another paper in the Journal of Business Research that I have worked on recently, where we look at managerial processes that universities adopt to enhance knowledge exchange, to try and do better in that knowledge exchange function. So, and both these papers, they show that there is no one answer. Depending on the context, you have to choose from a variety of models that are available to balance your priorities. Academic freedom, which is pure research, requires one kind of processes. Commercial interests and societal needs, societal interests. All of them, they're not independent of each other. They go hand in hand. But Which one is given greater importance at what point in time, at which part of the research portfolio of the university, depends on local needs and context. So, and there is another piece of work I have done, which is for the World Intellectual Property Organization, the WIPO, where we had developed a manual for universities to actually do this, how to incentivize their academics and how to incentivize their TTOs, the technology transfer offices, to do this better, right? So there as well, we saw that there is no one solution. There are many solutions, and depending on the context, you choose the right kind of incentives. So there is a huge amount of research out there. I'm more than happy to point them to your listeners. But the main thing is no one solution. There are many.
Professor, what skills and mindset should student and early career researchers develop to thrive in collaborative innovation environment?
Early career researchers, which is very, very important and which is an absolutely apt point that you have mentioned. For early career researchers, first of all, given that they are early career, they need to focus on the quality of the research. That is something which cannot be compromised, as their whole careers depend on it, right? So what they publish, where they publish, what they patent, who they co-author with or work with, what is their team, the integrity of the data sources, the integrity of the analysis. All of that is important for students, for not students, for early career researchers to develop themselves. That is the basic, most fundamental thing. However, increasingly what is becoming important in this arena is that every time we start thinking of a new project, we start thinking of a research question and how to go about it, we are also being encouraged to think of an impact pathway. That is, if we are able, who is this question important for? Which stakeholders in the national economy or international economy who would find this question interesting and relevant? Who would the answers benefit? And finally, if you find those answers, if your research project is successful, how would you take those answers and bring it to the attention of somebody who can benefit from it? Now, we are being asked not to think about this at the end of the project. We are being asked to think about this at the beginning of the project, right? So that these answers are in place when the research has started progressing. And that, I think, is the biggest change in mindset that early career researchers need to have at this point in time, because impact and pathways to impact generation is becoming more and more important in our research careers. So I would think this mindset of impact and where that impact will come, how it will come, is something at the very beginning of the project, is something that they should focus on.
Professor,
And
yeah, please.
no, please go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah,
Go
please,
ahead.
please.
No, and the last thing I want to add is that no impact is small. Even if it's the smallest little bit of opportunity to take an answer to and bring it to the attention of somebody who can benefit, do it. It will give you benefits in the end, in the long term. So never shy away from making even a small impact if necessary.
Professor, I'd like to conclude this episode with one last question.
Sure.
Looking ahead, what emerging trends or policy shift do you think will most influence the future of inclusive innovation partnership?
Uh, what future trends? I think there are quite a few pulls and pushes on the university sector right now. Um, a lot of negative and positive publicity is happening at the same time for all different kinds of reasons. But one thing that I'm happy is that there is increasing societal awareness of the importance of universities along all dimensions: education, research, impact. So as long as we can bring that attention on the universities and make them adapt to the changes in happening elsewhere in the world, we should be okay, and we should be able to, as a result, bring together inclusive innovation partnerships and enhance them. So something like the rise of AI through LLMs. Basically, AI has been there for a while, but LLMs, and they are making a mark in academia, in teaching, in research already. So how do universities um, adapt as a result? Because our potential partners in industry are also adapting to it, right? So how do we sort of co-evolve with this new technology is something we should be aware of. The other aspect that I think is becoming very, very important is that there is increasing awareness of the requirement for interdisciplinary research. Because the problems are becoming very complex, they are becoming very wide. Interdisciplinarity is the other trend that we have to be aware of, and we have to be ready to embrace as universities, as researchers. And if the university wants to create an ecosystem, interdisciplinarity is at the heart of it. Without it, ecosystems are non-functional. So the key trends to look out for: interdisciplinarity, long distance research networks, or even short distance ones, to create a proper ecosystem, more connectivity as we go along between universities and industry, because now in this kind of a dynamic world we live in, we cannot just remain ivory towers, and we are not ivory towers anymore. We are very well embedded into the local economy, to the regional and national economy, and as a result, we are embedded with industry, with other sectors of the economy, right? And this is a fast-changing ecosystem that we belong to, and older models of research and older models of engagement, or even just older models of doing research and behaving as a university will no longer work. We have to be a lot more futuristic in our mind. So I think that is where we are heading for.
Listeners, thank you for joining us for this insightful conversation with Dr. Abhijit Sengupta. We have explored how knowledge transfer, inclusion, innovation, and strong partnership can drive real social impact, especially for SMEs and underserved communities. A big thank you to Dr. Abhijit Sengupta for sharing their expertise and inspiring examples. And to our listeners, we hope this discussion spark new ideas for building more collaborative, equitable innovation ecosystems. Thank you once again, Dr. Abhijit Sengupta, for generously sharing your time and insight with us on our platform.
Thank you, Deepak. Thank you, Deepak, very much for the invitation. It was a pleasure.